week around this time on Times Radio, we talk to someone who's been at the centre of one of the week's big news stories, someone who has found themselves in the thick of it. Today, I'm joined by Jayne, a Christian and LGBT activist who chairs the Ban Conversion Therapy Coalition and is the founder of the Ozanne Foundation. She's been campaigning for the Church of England to embrace a plurality of views on sexuality. The Church has made a step in that direction. Following several days of debate, the General Synod, the National Assembly of the Church, voted yesterday to allow gay couples to receive a blessing in the Church of England for the first time in history, but they still won't be able to get married in church. Jayne, Ozanne, thank you very much for joining us on the thick of it this week.
Thank you, Cathy.
Just want to take you back to a week ago, the eve of General Synod. How apprehensive were you about the next week?
Well, I really wasn't sure which way it would go. You know, this is the first time we've had a debate like this amongst this synod, amongst this group of people who were elected a year or so ago. So we weren't 100% sure of where those people were. We'd read people's election addresses. We got a sense that a third were going to be progressive and a third were going to be very conservative. But that middle third, well, all was up for grabs. And I was keen to try and table an amendment, as you've sort of touched on, that would ask us to be debating the real question that we all want to get down to, which is about equal marriage. And that really is about whether gay people like myself can have sex. I mean, it's as brutally simple as that. And yet we're not being honest about that as the core issue.
Yeah.
Nor are we being honest about the fact that we're really divided and we need to find a way that can cope with both sets of views.
Well, and it's interesting, a lot of people probably have never been to the General Synod, but take us behind the scenes. Is there kind of like, were you lobbying people to kind of come round to your view? How does it work?
Well, it's not, there are similarities and differences to the Westminster Parliament. You know, at least in Westminster, you have parties that people overtly belong to and they stand, you know, as a Labour candidate or a Lib Dem. Here it's far more subtle. So you have people who might join one of your fringe meetings. We have something called the Gender Sexuality Group on Synod, and we know that there's about 100 members of that. There's a conservative evangelical group, and I have no idea, I think there's about 80 people on that. So if you like, there are those lobby groups. But as I say, there's also these people in the middle. And then there's the bishops, and nobody really knows where any of them are. So people like me were writing, you know, hundreds of emails to everyone saying, please, this is why I'm tabling my amendment. Please, can you think of supporting it? And obviously getting hundreds of emails in return. There's obviously been various LGBT people wanting to share their stories, and I've encouraged them to write to bishops. I think where I was answering your question a week ago was that I thought that I would probably get a lot of support in the House of Clergy, i.e. there was about 200 or so clergy members, in the House of Laity. But it would be the House of Bishops where the problems would lie.
So they're the stick in the muds, are they?
Yeah, well, to be fair, they've put forward what they thought the right thing to do was. And when we have votes on amendments, we often end up having to have them in each house. So we need to have a majority in each house. And of course, the bishops, as it was shown, vote en masse a lot of the time and block every single amendment. Now, there were a few bishops who were bravely broke away from that, but that was going to be the problem, and that's what it proved to be.
And on Wednesday, you made your own contribution, didn't you? So how did that go?
Yeah, well, I made contributions actually on Wednesday and Thursday. I don't know how on the Wednesday, I had an amendment where I was asking for the apology that the bishops and archbishops were saying the church should make to be delayed until we actually had some action that would remove the discrimination.
Because you want gay people to be able to get married in church just like heterosexual people.
Well, it's not just that. I want the harm to stop. You know, it's not just as simple as marriage. It's about the teaching of the church that tells people like me that I am unchristian, that I am sinful if I'm in a committed, loving relationship, a marriage or a civil partnership where I'm having sex. And if you teach that to a young LGBT person growing up in a conservative church, as I myself experienced, that gives you huge senses of guilt and shame for just wanting to love and be loved. It forces a lot of people to go down the conversion therapy route, and frankly, it leads to, for many, to a life of misery. And we've had, so many testimonies about that. The medical profession themselves have been giving reports, the UN, the UK government, but the Conservatives in the church just don't want to engage with that. I think that I'm making it all up. But it's that teaching that we need to change. We need the harm to stop, and then let's apologise. But just to explain, so stop saying we're sorry, which we've been doing now for about 10 years, but we've allowed the abuse to continue, and it's meaningless.
Well, clearly emotions running high. I can tell you're angry about it.
Yes.
No, fair enough. But Justin Welby too was tearful in his speech yesterday. Did you feel any sympathy for him trying to hold these warring factions together?
Well, he was tearful when he was talking about the Anglican Communion. No, I don't actually. So yesterday I gave a speech in my amendment about equal marriage, where I was calling for an honest appraisal of the fact we are deeply divided, not just in Synod, but across the country. The Times themselves did a YouGov poll that showed that 46%, nearly half of Anglicans, want same-sex marriage. A third, 36%, don't. But the group who do are a substantial majority. And at the moment, we're telling them that is sinful, unchristian, and something that won't happen for at least 10 years. And I was saying, come on, guys, we need to find a way of allowing for both views, which is what the Archbishop himself said in the summer to the primates of the Anglican Communion, that we needed to respect the different theological views people had and allow this to be a matter of conscience. And that's where I thought the honest, right, just, proper, true place would be for us all. But it's not. What we've had instead is a complete fudge. And, everybody knows it. I had a lot of Conservatives coming up to me over the last few days, voting for my amendment, saying, Jayne, you're absolutely right. We need to deal with this once and for all. We can't just keep putting it off.
Yeah. I mean, do you think the church will carry on putting it off? Do you think this is going to happen, that same-sex marriage will be allowed in a church in your lifetime? Or are you going to have to part company with the church over this?
Well, that's a very good question. We turned down an opportunity for a request. One of the amendments was to say, well, can we look at this in at least 2 years' time? Synod threw that out. At the moment, the commitment is to look at this in 5 years' time. And Cathy, even if we did agree tomorrow that we wanted same-sex marriage, it would take at least 5 years, probably 8, to get the legislation both approved in the Church of England and then through Parliament. So, we're talking 13 years.
So would you seriously consider quitting the Church of England over this?
Yes, I am at that point. I'm not going to make that decision right now. I want to see what happens in the summer. So at the moment, what we actually agreed yesterday was, in principle, we can have blessings of individuals. We can't bless their relationship, just to be clear. We can't bless them having sex because that's sinful, but we can bless them as two individuals who come to our church. So it's not quite how it's been packaged to the nation, but we'll only start doing that in July once we've agreed what we've called some pastoral guidance.
Right.
But for me, the critical point, and I keep coming back to this, Cathy, it's the harm we know we're doing. We've heard thousands of testimonies now, and yet nobody seems to be really addressing that head on. And I do not want to be part of an institution that is discriminatory and causes harm.
Jayne Ozanne, thank you very much for talking to us about your week in the thick of it. And it's a very tangled story, but thank you very much for sharing that with